going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. This is our top 10 hottest selling comics of the week, our weekly video series brought to you by PopCultureZone.com. Before we get into this week's top 10 books, don't forget to check out PopCultureZone.com's. Their links are below. Check them out if you're interested in getting your hands on some awesome exclusive and incentive variants at affordable costs, CGC slabs, and of course all different kinds of pop culture items, including toys and statues. And if you're buying raw books, they ship at a flat rate fee of only $4.99. Pop Culture Zone is also on eBay, where they still hold a 100% customer feedback rating with over 8,000 ratings this year alone. Those links are below. Check them out and make sure you follow them on eBay as well.
You know what else we do a pretty good job of is this thing that Chris does. It's called the top 10 look back props or flops. We take the top 10 hottest comics of the week from Cover Price, which they deliver on a Monday. Our show's on a Sunday, obviously, so that's a nice week for Chris to kind of decipher all of the information, the numbers, the sales, etc. by the end of the week and see if any of these books, he'll pick 3 books here and see if they're props or flops from the list. But right now, Chris, why don't we just get into the list real quick, and then we'll get into your props or flops. At number 10, we have Batman. At number 10, we have Black Panther number 3, the first appearance of Tosin. At number 9, we have Sandman Universe Nightmare Country number 1, the Jenny Frison 1/100 cover. That thing shot up quick. At number 8, we have Spider-Punk number 1, the Takashi Okazaki 1/50. At number 7, we have Strange Academy 16, the first full appearance of Howie. At number 6, we have Battlestar Galactica number 1. At number 5, we have Amazing Spider-Man 93, the Patrick Gleason variant of Chasm. Number 4, we have Spider-Man 2099 number 1. At number 3, we have Doctor Strange 48, the first meeting of Doctor Strange and Brother Voodoo. At number 2, we have Moon Knight number 1. And at number 1, we have Batman Beyond the White Knight number 1. First cameo appearance of a new Robin, and this had some release issues, day of release or week of release issues, and I'm surprised it's at number 1, to be honest with you. So, Chris, interesting top 10 list, a nice mix, I would say, more DC than normal, which is what we want to see here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Battlestar Galactica, which you kind of have a connection to.
Still up there.
Yeah. So, but you have 3 here that you are most interested in to dissect and tell us if it's props or flops.
I will say this book isn't on my list. It almost made it, but it's the Doctor Strange 48, the first team up of, or the first meeting between Doctor Strange and Brother Voodoo. I think this is a really, really awesome book to talk about. I hope it's on next week's list, because if it is, I'll probably pick it for one of my top 3. But I thought these 3 that I picked were really interesting to talk about, because it's not just books that I champion. It's books that are interesting that might lean to props or flops. So my number 3 pick is Black Panther number 3, first appearance of Tosin Oduye. Okay, let's look at this book. Now, here's a funny thing, guys. You want to know something? I've been picking up Black Panther on my pull list. It's not technically a pull list. I just go when I order the previews orders from my comic shop 3 months in advance. And for some reason, I didn't pick this up. Shoot myself in the foot. But let's look at these numbers. 170% upward trend in sales when it hit the top 10 last week. Now, I crunched numbers as of today, folks. So when we look at this week's numbers, that's as of today. That is relevant to right now. So last week's high 9.8 sale, when it hit the top 10, was a $300 sale. This week, which was on the 21st, so that was just 3 days ago, was $299.99, another $300 sale. So there was a couple in between there that sold for like $240, $250, but you get an idea there of how that book's moving in a 9.8. Now, the raw average when it hit the top 10 last week was at 53. Now, I want you guys to keep this in mind, because I always say an average raw, take with a grain of salt, because it doesn't consider grade. This is a practically brand new book. that's only been out for a few months. So you're going to probably assume that most of these are at least, are high grade. I couldn't imagine there being books on the market under a very fine of these right now. So you can actually gauge these average raws a little more smoothly. I think $53 next to this week's average raw, but it was only a few books, 61. So if you look down at the bottom there where it says there were 16 units sold last week when it hit the top 10, there was only 3 raw sold this week. So, take that again. This week's average raw is $61 with a little bit of grain of salt. If there was more volume on the market this week, it may reflect differently. I don't think this book is going to return to the top 10 for this week's because it only sold 3 raw copies. Okay, props or flops. I was just recently on Swagglehouse's roundtable chat with a bunch of other amazing YouTubers, and we talked about this book. We compared it, to certain other modern books, and we know, or if you don't know, Bleeding Cool, when this book was coming out, released an article stating that Tosin is going to be the next Miles Morales. And that's really what drove this book up so high, so fast. And while, if you read that article, they talked about how they have inside information about Marvel's plans for this character. And it's from that information that they were saying, making this comparison, because they're saying that he's not going to be like the Black Panther or the king of Wakanda like T'Challa, but he is going to be this major Black Panther character in Wakanda that, is that next generation. It's going to have just so much, I think, story and mythos around him. So it kind of leaves me weary, though, because there's a lot riding on one outlet, Bleeding Cool, really making this book what it is on the market today and since it came out. So do I give this book props or flops? Do I think this book is worth $300 and a 9.8? Do I think this book is worth $50+ in a raw copy? I'm going to give this book flops right now because I don't think it is. I don't. I think that if that article never came out and we didn't have any quote unquote inside information, I think this character in this book would have got hot and it would have peaked a little bit, but then it would have already cooled off some. But here's where I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself. And Jeff, I want you to hear me out here because I know you're going to have some things to say about this. But we know, and you've heard me say this, Jeff, and the audience too. We know that Kevin Feige is in charge of what's going on the comic book side of Marvel as well now. And I've said this a bunch of times, Jeff. Over the last 10+ years, Marvel has taken from the movies and regurgitated it, chewed it up, spit it back out and try to chew it up again with everything that's going on in the movies. And then they try to recycle it in the comic books after the fact. When we want the comic books to tell the stories and then the movies to reflect what had happened in the comic books and not vice versa. We don't want the movies to make their own stuff and then the comic books to, piggyback off of that. I think this is a great opportunity, especially, unfortunately, with what's happened with Chadwick Boseman passing and what they're going to do with the character in the MCU, especially with knowing they're going to carry on the stories of Wakanda with the Wakanda TV show, showing the stories of other people from Wakanda. Kevin Feige absolutely has the power to build this character up with get some good writers behind it, some good stories behind this character in the comics, canon to the comics, and then bring those stories in the MCU. So I know I'm kind of like not necessarily breaking the rules, but I'm not being black and white here with the props or flops. I give this book flops simply because I think this is a book that if I was trying to buy, even raw, I'm going to sit on it more. I'm going to sit on it more. And I think focus is going to shift from this book some. But Jeff, while I don't know if he'll ever be truly compared or be comparable to Miles Morales, if they build this character up in the comics and bring him properly into the MCU, this book could continue to blow past what it's at right now. So, hey, 6 months, a year from now, I could be eating my own words on saying flops to this book right now and a pass on it. I don't know.
I'll tell you what. I agree with your flops, and I'm going to play devil's advocate too. I think it's a good spec book because what you said, sounds like they're setting up a strong Wakandan character, right? Maybe, but here's the deal. Think about this. That was issue 3. He wasn't in issue 4. He was in 2 panels in issue 5. Also, it was overhyped. You don't go out there saying that like this is the next Miles Morales. I mean, Bleeding Cool. They're very divisive, but they should know that they have some power, and influence, things like that. And that's why this book is where it is. You said that, and I agree with you. I'm not paying $300 for a 9.8. I am not paying $60 for a raw copy. No way. But these prices are going to come down, right? And if you see it in the 20 or below, think about it. I would say because it is a decent spec book, definitely. Right. That's what I would say about that. So, All right, moving on.
Fair step.
You have your second book, most interesting book on this list. Is it a problem?
Spider-Punk. Spider-Punk, number 1, Takashi Okazaki, 1 in 50 variant. I love the artwork. What do you think of that cover, Jeff? You like that cover?
I do like that cover because this character's just out there, man. Like, and I think this cover, I think that the art lends to how out there this character is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel you. I think it's just like how they did the animation on the Into the Spider-Verse and how it really brought those characters to life. It set a tone. I feel you with this too. I think this kind of sets a tone for this character.
Yeah.
I dig it. Yeah, let's look at what this book is doing. It had 186% upward trend in sales last week when it hit the top 10, okay? And then that week when it hit that top 10, a high raw sold for $230. Wow. This week, the high raw was for $199. That is a 13% decrease in value, but I always say, don't get caught up on highs. Don't just get caught up on highs. Last week's average raw when it hit the top 10 was 146. This week, 167. So, hey, I'm showing you guys right there. Why not get caught up on highs? Because look at this. When you average out the raws, and again, this is a brand new book. Most of these copies have to be around the near mint range. Very fine in near mint to 9.8 qualifying near mint, right? That's a 14% increase when you take the averages. Now, I do apologize, folks. Don't mind the units sold down there. That was for the last book we talked about. I'm sorry, guys. I still need to be a better editor and proof my stuff. But I will say this, though, there was less sold this week than there was last week when it hit the top 10, but not to that degree. Here's what I think of this book. Props or flops. I'm going to come straight out and say it. I'm giving this book flops. Now, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, and I love the Spider Totem, and I love all these different Spider characters. I'm not one to say, oh, it's oversaturating the market. Spider-Man this, Spider that, Spider Pig, Spider-Man, Spider Ham, Spider Slam, Spider Spam, whatever the case. Spider Punk. Spider Funk. I'm all for it, man. I am all for it. But here's my thing with this book. This issue 1, first solo title, sure. It's not even the first appearance of the character. And while it is a 1 in 50 variant with a pretty cool cover, pretty, punk rock cover, man. This is going to be a book to me that is going to be forgotten. It's just going to be forgotten. 5-10 years from now. I just don't see enough people going out there and saying, I'm going to pay over $200 freaking dollars for this book. Raw. I don't see it happening. And I say this a lot because I follow the trends of variance a lot. Incentive variants often peak high and dip low. One way to recognize these things is if you guys ever check out Midtown Comics, which I don't support them. I don't support them anymore for the most part. They will often though have blowout variant sales. And it'll be like 60 to 75% off of exclusive and incentive variants. And you got these comic books that are priced to like $50, $80 and they're 60, 75% off. Because you hit that, you hit those spots in time where just the focus on these books is shifted. Now, is it okay for somebody to pay this type of money for this book? I'm not hating on you if you do. And I've said this before, and Jeff, I'll say this again. I do believe that there are people out there that are willing to pay this premium just because they want to make sure they get their hands on this book because they love the artwork. So many collectors out there will pay a premium for a variant simply because they collect variants because of the art. And if they can live with that, then that's perfectly fine. And some people will say, well, guess what? I have the money to blow. Maybe in 6 months from now, this book will only be selling for $80, but I want to spend $200 on it because I want it right now. And nobody is going to tell me otherwise. And that's okay too. But I'm giving this book a flops. If you're looking at this book as an investment or anything like that, in my humble opinion, it just ain't happening.
That's a good point right there. Chris, can I just kind of be vanilla and be like, I can't say either way? Because variants like this, it's like a person's taste, and it's what you said. If that person wants it right now, paying $230 for it, you and I say it all the time. If it's worth it to you to pay that much money, then pay that much money. Right. I wouldn't personally. I don't love this cover enough. I'm not in love with the character, but I can't give it a props or a flops. Spec value, or I would say it's a flop, but like, again, it's a unique character, and you have a lot of people out there that maybe it's creating a new niche, and it's, people are going to be all on board. So that's all I could say about that. I'm not going to get too into it. This is mostly your segment anyway, so I can get away with that.
No, adding that context, and it makes a lot of sense, and that's why it's funny. If you guys hear me talk a lot, stuff isn't always black and white. So even though we're doing a props for flop show, when we have to pick, left or right, or it's still there's depth to this stuff, and there's so many different ways of collecting. Like you said, how are we even gauging? What are we giving it props on? What are we giving it flops on? Are we giving it flops because we think it's a horrible character and just a bad story? Or are we giving it flops because of the, the value and the speculation narrative? And I will add for context, and Jeff, I think you can agree, the segment is more built on the, looking at it from both a speculative and an investment standpoint, right? So, but you bring up a lot of good points, because I do think this character has absolutely great potential, that there could be some really good cult followers of the character. There could be some good stories that come out of it. But when it just comes to the value of this book holding, I just don't see it.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we got one more book here from this list. What do you got?
All right. This book I think it's been 3 weeks that this book has been on the top 10 list, and it hit number 1 today, so I had to pick it. I had to pick it for my number 1. Plus, some DC love. Batman Beyond the White Knight, number 1. Let's talk about it, folks. This is a first appearance of a new Robin. Not much detail yet, and technically, just to make sure we have all the proper context there, it was a cameo. It was in cameo. This book, when it hit the top 10 last week, had 101% upward trend in sales. It hit that top 10 with a high raw of $22. This week's high raw was $20. So again, a brand new book, high raw. So you're probably looking at high near mint grades. So, not too bad on the highs there, $2 difference. But then when we look at these raws, oh shoot, another error. That's supposed to say $19. God, I'm killing it, guys. I'm killing it.
What's supposed to say 19?
The this week's average raw.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Last week's last week's average raw was 18. This week's average raw was $19, folks. So I apologize again. Oh my gosh, I'm killing it. So there's really been no movement really in both for the highs and for the average. Let's look at this though. There's two CGC 9.8 sales that happened, and I'm going to look at this. First one was on April 2nd for $120. You can look at that and say, well, that's not too bad. $30 to grade the book when you consider fees and shipping and all that, roughly. And then, you know, a book that's selling for $20 right now, I'm not too mad about this selling for $120. But then 10 days later, you had a book go for over double, $260. Now, I don't know if those were pre-order 9.8 sales or somehow some people got them back already, whatever the case may be. But that's troubling to me. That's very troubling to me because you could still buy this book in 9.8 potential for about $20. So let's figure this out. You can buy 10 books that are probably 9.8 candidates for about $200 right now. And you could spend less than you would on that CGC 9.8. You could take 3 of those and send them out, three to 4 of them, and send them out to CGC and pay about $60 to get them graded. So now you bought 10 raw copies, you got 4 coming back from CGC, and you spent the same amount of money. And if one of those books comes back a 9.8 and you can now sell it for $260 or even just say $200, you are making bank. I mean, hey, you know, in terms of percentage wise and return on investment, right? If 2 come back, man, 2 come back 9.8, it makes no sense that there's somebody out there willing to pay $200+ for a brand new book, for a book that's selling for $18, $19, $20, $21, $22 in 9.8 candidate grade. It makes absolutely no freaking sense. Now, before I give it my props or flops, Jeff, I want you to jump in and just talk about that, looking at it from that perspective. Like, for me, it makes no sense. How about for you?
I agree. It doesn't make much sense either. I think, and again, I'm going to go back to the reason why this book is still, it was the distribution issues where people, I think on the West Coast had problems getting this book and everybody went into a mad scramble and it kind of elevated this book. That's why I think where it is where it is. I think they rectified that and had copies delivered later the next week. So I think it's a false kind of sense of demand. I don't think that I have this book. I haven't read it yet. But I don't think that it's like, you know, because this is what the Murphy verse, which is not even the proper DC, you know, DC universe. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and then to your point, let's say that that's what's going on, and that's what's driving this book in a raw copy to sell for $20. But still, even with that price, why are you paying $260?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you may have missed out because of the distribution issues of getting this for cover price, but you can still buy it in a 9.8 potential for $20, but you're paying $260 for that 9.8. It makes no sense. So here's the thing, guys. I gave my first 2 books flops. Is this going to be the first props or flops where I give all 3 books flops? Well, guess what, guys? I'm going to give this book props.
Ooh, interesting.
I am. Interesting, right? And here's the thing. Here's the thing why. And again, what you were saying for the last book, Jeff, it's not black and white. Whoever bought this book in a 9.8 for $260, I'm giving you flops. All right? You there, you, whoever you are, if you're watching, you paying over $200 for this book and a 9.8, floppity flop, flippity flop. Horrible, horrible. But for this book right now, to pay $20 for it, I'm going to give this book props. And let me give you a couple of reasons why. One, Jeff, like you said, if it was a distribution issue, I've done this before. If there's a book that I want that I don't get for cover price or whatever, and I got to pay a little bit more. And what's the cover price of this book? I think it's I think it was a $6.99 cover price?
I could go pull it out. It's a nice glossy book though.
Yeah. So I've done that before. I miss a book for $3.99. Maybe I'll buy it on eBay for $7 plus $4 shipping or something. I'm not mad about it. Same thing could be said with this book. Maybe people really wanted this book. They want to read it. They're interested in the story. They're interested about this new Robin. And we all know that Batman is that guy for DC. Batman always sells. So I'm not mad at you for paying $18, $19, $20 for this book, regardless if it'll hold that value or not. But here's another thing of why I'm giving this book props. Batman does sell extremely well. When all else fails for DC, Batman continues to sell. And even in an age where there's so much speculation, even within the comic books outside of, movie spec, a lot of these first appearances of characters, they hit these top 10 lists. They're up there for a week or two and then they go away and people forget about them. People tend to remember more, especially with DC Comics, these new characters that have been introduced in Batman comics. And I think there is definitely potential for whatever's going on in this story arc and for this new Robin to continue to draw attention for months or some years to come. Now, does this mean this book is going to be worth hundreds of dollars? No. Does it mean that it could be worth more than 20 at some point? I think it could. So there's definitely something here for this book, and it's not hitting a raw price that's really concerning me, especially with the circumstances that you brought up, Jeff, about people just struggling to get this book when it came out. So I'm not mad at any of those things, but the only thing I'm mad at is the $260 9.8 sale. Shame. I'm just joking about the shame, but
they should be actually. All right. So my thoughts on this. First off, it is a $4.99 book.
$4.99. Okay.
It's interesting. It's ages 17 plus. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know. Maybe it's a darker kind of read. I don't know, man. I can't give this props. I don't think this has any kind of hit in the Batman mythos. I haven't read it yet. I'm talking shit right now. That's kind of ignorant of me, actually. Wow. But it's like an alternative kind of universe. Who knows where it's going to go, what's going to happen. And the only reason it was on people's radar last minute, other than maybe people who are fans of the Murphyverse, has been the distribution issues. I'm going to give it, I wouldn't pay $20 for this. I'm going to give it flops on that. I don't think there's any spec value or investment value that goes with it. That's my opinion.
Just to be clear, because we just talked about the mostly spec and investment value. If you hear me out, guys, and what I'm saying, I give this book props simply because I understand why it made the list, and Jeff keeps iterating that. And I'm not mad at people loving Batman because they do, because Batman always sells, and wanting to pay $20 for this. I'm not giving this props to tell you to go invest in it. Although, like I said, and I'll repeat, and sorry I think I cut you off, Jeff, but I'm not saying that this book can't, be of, it has more ability to stay in people's minds down the long road than, say, a Spider-Punk variant, should I say.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Although Spider-Punk makes it into the new Spider-Man, across the universe. You know what I mean?
There
like,
yep.
Who knows, dude? By the way, Dale McNown, yes, I am. Good eyes right there. You win tonight. We don't have a prize for that, though. Again, I'll go with flops on this. So I got 2 flops and kind of incomplete. You got 2 flops and a props. So that was a fun top 10 look back props or flops. We'll have a new list next week where Chris dissects it and gives you his 3 most interesting picks and if they're props or flops.